When most of us went to sleep Tuesday night, the vote count was still incomplete in the Canton runoffs, and that's when the fireworks began. This is cell phone video of the arrest of Canton Democratic Municipal Executive Committee member Kimberly Reedus after she was involved in an argument with an elderly poll worker.
And so she started cursing at the lady, and it went from there, and then she continued to curse. Then she and her daughter were quite vocal when the law enforcement was over there trying to calm her down. As I found the law enforcement said, turn around.
According to police reports, Reedus called the woman something equivalent to a baboon's rear end when she questioned why she was taking unsealed ballot boxes out of the building. Reedus is charged with disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, and giving false information to law enforcement.
I saw her 2 weeks ago, and the way she was acting then, I'm not surprised at all. She should have been arrested 2 weeks ago, in my opinion.
The vote count continued Wednesday without incident, but with heavy criticism of the executive committee's sluggish progress and behavior.
Well, we had some affidavit ballots that still had to be counted. We had some curbside ballots still had to be counted, and a few absentees.
Was it just too much to do in one evening?
Yes, sir, it was.
Incompetence. Incompetence by the people that were trying to run it. And that's my opinion. I think if they had tried to work their way through it and do it right, and not tried to sit here and do it ignoring what the laws are and gone ahead and done it like they're supposed to, they could have gone ahead and finished it.
Well, voters in some cities made it very clear during Tuesday's primary elections they want change. Preliminary numbers have Canton Mayor William Truly headed for a runoff. Our David Kinney is live in Canton. He begins our election 2013 coverage. David?
Yeah, it's been almost 24 hours since the polls closed here in Canton, and they're still trying to work towards certifying this election. That's because the vote count here has been very slow and filled with multiple delays. The Canton Democratic Executive Committee was under the microscope as about 50 onlookers watched them count votes the day after the election. It was a slow process compounded by an old ballot found jammed in a scanning machine.
It was bent up and all that kind of stuff, but we discard and throw it in a waste can from 2012 presidential election.
Then there were more delays after arguments were sparked on how the ballots were being handled.
When I asked one question about where that number come from, you hollered and screamed at me and said I couldn't speak without getting your permission.
Really now, this is interfering with the process of the election. And I want an officer up here. You got one out here. This is interfering with the process of the election.
Some candidates say they plan to challenge the results. Others say they plan to talk to party leaders about what can be done to guarantee speedy election results in the near future.
Obviously, there have been a lot of glitches in getting to this point. I want to make sure that the Democratic Committee meets so that we don't have these types of challenges. Our citizens deserve better, and I want to make sure we don't have these challenges in the future.
I think it's unpredictable complications that occur. I don't think it's anything that the Municipal Executive Committee has done, anything that candidates have done. We just seem to have more complications that seemingly are somewhat highlighted.
Based on the high number of complaints, Rankin and Madison County District Attorney Michael Guest says he's got enough to open an investigation into the Canton elections.
The complaints that we receive have run from voter intimidation, inappropriately assisting people as they're voting. There also have been complaints that arose even before the elections about individuals who were registered at addresses in which there were no residents.
Like on Berry Street in Canton, where there aren't any houses but 8 registered voters using this street as their address. If their names show up on the voter rolls for numerous elections, Michael Guest says they broke the law.
While it would be a proper address, there would not be a residence there, and that there would be not one voter but multiple voters registered at these fictitious addresses. So those are all things that we will begin to look at.
Cross Street in Canton is virtually vacant of homes, but loaded with voters, 17 to be exact, and 6 of them all live at one address.
One of the complaints that we have received is that people who are living outside of the city are voting.
Guest says he'll also form a task force to go after what some call ghost voters.
It's too important of a right to vote for that to be taken lightly.
The DA's office investigation will begin after the general election in June.
We're just concerned that the elections are held fairly and held in accordance with the law.
Ray Roseman lost the Canton Ward 1 alderman's race by 4 votes. He's now filed a complaint in court and was granted a temporary restraining order, putting a delay on the certification of that race. Roseman's attorney, Corey Wilson, is a former chief of staff for the Secretary of State's office.
And in the petition, Mr. Roseman details observations that people had on Election Day of some intimidation and some other irregularities. Also details some problems with the way particularly absentee ballots and affidavit ballots were handled by the Municipal Executive Committee.
Roseman and nearly a dozen others wrote detailed letters on the problems they saw at the polls and how the votes were counted.
We think that there are a number of those ballots that were counted that should not have been counted. They were not proper under Mississippi law.
Roseman also got a court order to open up the ballot boxes last week. They claim poll workers were intimidated by Democratic Municipal Executive Committee members to break the law.
There are problems with the way the numbers add up in terms of just the number of ballots that were issued to the precinct versus the number of ballots that were voted. It's real hard to figure out how they got to the certified totals that they did in the Democratic primary. And in addition to the things that they observed on Election Day and then in the counting and handling of those ballots, there's some significant issues with this election.
Some of the voter fraud allegations will be heard by a judge in a Canton courtroom next Friday during a temporary injunction hearing, which could delay the voter certification even longer to allow time for a full investigation. This is Berry Street in the city of Canton. It's pretty much vacant. Not one house exists on this street, but there are some vacant voters here who are very vocal at the polls when it comes to elections. According to state records, 6 of the 8 voters who claim Berry Street as their home voted in the federal elections, which Secretary of State Delbert Hosemann says is a real concern.
Those should have been purged long ago.
Hosemann says overcrowded voter rolls are a problem in 15 Mississippi counties.
For example, in Madison, they have 82,000 people registered to vote and 72,000 people who should be eligible to vote. It's 110%.
According to locals, the houses that were here on Berry Street were destroyed a number of years back during a flood. They say there actually hasn't been one voter here on Berry Street since 2005.
When you have excess voter roll participation like that, you can have somebody cast a ballot for somebody that's dead, moved out of state, or for any reason is no longer eligible to cast a vote in that precinct or that county or for that city. Every election since I have been here, we have gotten at least a few calls from people who go to vote who have already had their ballots cast for them.
Canton is the only place that we have received complaints on, and the complaints have been numerous.
Madison-Rankin County District Attorney Michael Guest is investigating a laundry list of election concerns from the recent municipal races in Canton. His office made numerous convictions on voter fraud charges in Madison County in the past.
It causes great concern if those people who are registered at those addresses then go to the vote and go to the polls and cast their vote. You know, one of the things one of the complaints that we have received is that people who are living outside of the city are voting.
That's an indication of the mischief that can go on when you don't have the right voter rolls.
It's the county election commissioner's job to purge voters off the rolls. They declined to talk to us while they were involved in a hearing observing claims of fraud in the Ward 1 alderman's race in Canton. They can only remove names if voters don't vote in 2 consecutive federal elections. But the ghost voters on Berry Street keep going back to the polls.
We are going to continue to work to try to get to the bottom of that, and we're going to do all that we can if we find cases where individuals have broken the law, that they will once again be prosecuted.
Natchez Judge Forrest Johnson was appointed by the Mississippi Supreme Court to hear the case of allegations of improper election activities in Canton. Friday, he ruled the allegations were strong enough to have an injunction hearing in July. Ray Roseman's attorney says they have at least 7 witnesses ready to testify.
They saw improper assistance of voters. You mentioned that. We have evidence now that voters were voted for by the people doing the assisting. That's not proper. We saw disruptive environment. We saw threats to voters. We saw threats to poll workers. And again, by we, I mean witnesses who were there.
Incumbent Alderman Rodriguez Brown went on to win the general election. Judge Johnson also ruled to dissolve the temporary restraining order, which was delaying the certification of the race. His attorneys say the injunction is still robbing voters of their right to choose a candidate.
Well, I think anybody can say something. You know, anybody can allege these matters. You know, we have to look at the motives of these affiants and that sort of thing. So all of that will be investigated, and we'll be ready the next time we're in court.
There are serious irregularities with this election, and we are very happy that it looks like those are going to come out.
Judge Johnson told the court the final result would be Rodriguez Brown being declared the winner and sworn in, or if the plaintiffs prove their case, a special election would be called by the governor, calling voters back to the polls in the Ward 1 race there for the fourth time.
Well, we had so much going on, so much confusion. And
Canton poll workers took the stand describing the polling place on Election Day as unpleasant, confrontational, where at least one county election commissioner openly cursed and argued about a voter's ability to cast their vote on a machine.
Then they was bringing the voters in 2 and 3 at a time, and their name wasn't on in the book. It was an argument with us that they could vote the machine, and we say they couldn't vote it if their name wasn't on the book.
Ward 1 candidate Ray Roseman is trying to get the election results overturned, claiming the mother of his opponent tried to intimidate voters.
We've got strong proof in this case. We're obviously putting on witnesses to show what happened during Election Day, and we think the bottom line, again, this is about integrity, and the integrity of this election was destroyed.
Rodriguez Brown's attorney argued it was Roseman's daughter, who lives in Hinds County, who tried to cast a ballot illegally, and that his supporters were putting up most of the challenges.
Mr. Roseman's plan was to challenge many voters and take them from voting on the machines to paper ballots. That was his whole thing. And later that night, he wanted to get those paper ballots thrown out. That was his plan.
Poll workers say all the uproar turned many voters around at the doors.
And after all that was wasn't on, they left. They said they wasn't going to stay there and vote under those conditions.
New developments tonight in the fight for a Canton alderman seat.
Allegations of improper voter activities led to a courtroom trial. This is tonight's top story. Rosalind Anderson is live in our newsroom with details on this. Rosalind?
Campaigning will begin again soon for the men who want to represent Ward 1 in Canton. Today, the hearing was held in the Madison County Court. Judge Forrest Johnson ruled that a new race will be held for the highly contested post. Ray Roseman challenged the May election results, alleging improper activity. Incumbent Rodriguez Brown denied those claims and pointed the finger at Roseman's camp.
We're delighted with the court's ruling, and we think we certainly proved substantial irregularities during the voting on May 7th, as well as during the counting of the ballots and the handling of the ballots afterwards.
Mr. Roseman's plan was to challenge many voters and take them from voting on the machines to paper ballots. That was his whole thing. And later that night, he wanted to get those paper ballots thrown out.
Now, that response came from Mr. Mumford yesterday. We were unable to reach him or Mr. Brown for comment today following the hearing, but it is now up to Governor Phil Bryant to set a new election date for the Ward 1 seat.
Why are you doing this?
This is cell phone video of former Canton Municipal Executive Committee member Kimberly Reedus' arrest on May 21st. It all started when she and an elderly woman got into an argument as she left the courthouse with ballot boxes the night after the election when the votes still weren't all counted. The ruckus began after a concerned poll worker noticed the boxes weren't sealed, which is required by state law. Monday, Reedus was in court for her trial. She was found guilty of disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and providing police with false information. She got 30 days in jail for each count. Reedus won't have to spend a day in jail if she pays a $950 fine. She also received 1 year probation. Reedus nor prosecutors would talk on camera as they left the courthouse, but they did say that she is part of a grand jury investigation into possible illegal activity during the Canton elections. The outcome of that investigation is not yet complete.